In the news tonight, at least 56 civilians are killed in airstrikes on Manbij in northern Syria as a meeting on Syria convenes in London with the U.S. Secretary of State and a number of European foreign ministers in attendance. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights urges Turkey to uphold the rule of law as it rounds up thousands involved in a failed coup and voices alarm at the mass suspension of judges and prosecutors. And the French government urges lawmakers to extend emergency rule that gives police greater search and arrest powers after criticism it did not do enough to prevent the Nice truck attack. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. Here are the details. His Royal Highness Prince Faisal bin Al Hussein met with a delegation representing various U.S. congressional committees led by Republican Deputy Jason Chaffetz. The meeting reviewed the situation in the region and Prince Faisal briefed the delegation on the effect of the Syria crisis on the kingdom as well as efforts to confront terrorism. He underscored the need for sustainable solutions that support Jordan in addressing ongoing challenges, namely the refugee crisis and growing unemployment among the population. The Higher Committee for the National Employment Strategy discussed in a meeting at the Labour Ministry government measures to reduce unemployment rates and create work opportunities for Jordanians. Prime Minister Hani al-Mulki chaired the meeting where he reiterated the national priority of combating poverty and unemployment through financing small projects in the various governorates and remote areas. 25 million JDs have been allocated for the Development and Employment Fund to provide easy loans for young entrepreneurs. Mulki also urged a slow and gradual replacement of foreign labor with Jordanian manpower, making sure not to adversely affect the private sector. The measures are part of the executive program the government has presented to His Majesty King Abdullah in June. Airstrikes on the Daesh-held city of Manbij in northern Syria killed at least 56 civilians, including children. Residents in the city said they believe the attack was carried out by U.S.-led warplanes, according to reports by the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. The Syria Democratic Forces, an alliance of Kurdish and Arab fighters, have surrounded the city in an offensive that began late May, but Daesh attacks still occur in some areas of the surrounding countryside, slowing progress into the city. Kurdish sources say Daesh terrorists have deployed snipers, planted mines, and prevented civilians from leaving, hampering efforts to bomb the city without causing heavy casualties. At least 104 civilians have died from airstrikes since the start of the offensive. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has voiced concern for the roughly 70,000 civilians believed to be trapped between warring parties in Manbij. At present, the town has no electricity or water, and no medical facilities are known to be operating. Britain's Foreign Secretary called on Russia to use its unique ability to stop the Syria conflict by convincing Syrian President Bashar al-Assad to put an end to 5 years of fighting. Newly appointed British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson hosted a meeting on the Syria crisis in London, attended by the U.S. Secretary of State, the EU's foreign policy chief, as well as the foreign ministers of Germany, France and Italy. Speaking at a news conference following the meeting, Johnson said Russia in particular has the ability to persuade the Assad regime to end the carnage and return to the negotiating table. Johnson called the current situation in Syria dire and said the country faced a terrible humanitarian catastrophe.
No one would deny that the situation in Syria is hellish at the moment, and it is very, very hard to see a way through. But if there is a way through, then it must surely involve the regime somehow coming to terms with the moderates in the opposition, somehow engaging in a peace process with them.
UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Prince Zeid Ra'ad has urged Turkey to uphold the rule of law as it brings to justice those involved in a failed coup and voiced serious alarm at the mass suspension of judges and prosecutors. He called for independent observers to be able to visit places of detention in Turkey to check on conditions and for detainees to have access to lawyers and their families. Turkey has rounded up thousands of soldiers in the wake of the failed military coup and has called on the United States to hand over a cleric Ankara believes for the attempt to be behind the attempt to overthrow the government. In addition, thousands of judges and prosecutors were also suspended within hours of the failed coup.
We pay homage to the Turkish people for bravely standing up to this attempt to undermine its democracy. And we stress that it is important that the people who are responsible for these crimes are brought to justice. But they must be brought to justice in line with due process. The High Commissioner stresses that the independence of the judiciary and of the legal profession is key to the fair administration of justice. And judges must be able to exercise their functions without undue restrictions, pressures, threats, or interference. The mass suspension or removal of judges is cause for serious alarm, and reports that many have been subject to detention orders also raises concerns of arbitrary detention.
Meanwhile, the Turkish lira weakened beyond 3 to the dollar after news that the Education Board demanded the resignation of all deans working in universities, widening concern about the reach of a government crackdown. Traders cited concern about the purge in the higher education sector. Turkey's Higher Education Board ordered the resignation of all 1,577 deans employed at all universities, part of a wide-ranging purge of dozens of state institutions following a failed coup attempt. The Ministry of Education also revoked the licenses of 21,000 teachers working in private institutions. A militia defending the Pul ethnic group claimed an attack on an army base and town in the town of Nampala in central Mali that enabled gunmen to briefly seize control of the base. Omar Al-Jana, head of the National Alliance for the Protection of Pul Identity and the Restoration of Justice, made the claim on a radio station. Armed men in four-wheel drive vehicles and on motorcycles attacked Malian forces at several positions in Nampala early in the morning, according to an army spokesman. At least 12 soldiers died in the attack and 27 people were wounded, security sources said. German officials had no indication that the young Afghan refugee who used a knife and axe to attack passengers on a train in southern Germany late yesterday had been in contact with Daesh, said the public prosecutor in Mamberg at a news briefing. The attacker, who wounded 5 people, had left a note suggesting he developed sympathy for the group, which claimed responsibility for the attack. 2 of the victims are in life-threatening condition, according to German police. An update on the investigation in this report.
Inside the passenger train, it's easy to imagine the terrifying attack by the 17-year-old Afghan refugee. Armed with an axe, police say he severely wounded 4 Chinese tourists on board, fled the scene, injured a local woman, and tried to attack police before they shot him dead. Islamic State has claimed responsibility for the attack, but investigators say early evidence indicates he may have been self-radicalized. They found a hand-painted flag of Islamic State and a text written partly in Pashto inside his room at this hostel in the small Bavarian town of Oschenfurt, where the youth was staying with a foster family. Bavaria's interior minister says the 17-year-old came to Germany 2 years ago as an unaccompanied minor. After last week's deadly truck attack in Nice, this latest incident has deepened worries about so-called lone wolf attacks in Europe and puts pressure on German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who's welcomed hundreds of thousands of migrants to Germany over just the past year.
More than 2,500 migrants were plucked from overcrowded boats off the coast of Libya, and 1 body was recovered as rescue operations continued in the area. People smugglers operating in Libya took advantage of calm seas and warm weather, sending at least 26 rafts and wooden boats toward Italy, packed with migrants fleeing violence at home. 3 Italian Navy ships participated in the rescues, bringing more than 1,000 people to safety. 2 ships participating in the European Union anti-people smuggling mission Sophia also conducted rescues. The French government has urged Parliament to extend a period of emergency rule that gives police greater search and arrest powers French Prime Minister Manuel Valls wants lawmakers to back a 3-month rollover of the emergency regime imposed after a deadly attack last November. This came after criticism by opposition politicians that the government did not do enough to prevent last week's deadly truck attack in Nice that killed 84 people. Parliament was to hold an evening debate on the emergency rule plan. France imposed emergency rule after the November 13 attacks in which Daesh terrorists killed 130 people in Paris, giving the police powers to search homes and place people under immediate house arrest without advance clearance from judges. Britain enjoyed its hottest day of the year today, with temperatures soaring to 35 degrees Celsius in some parts of the country. People sunbathed and ate ice cream in London, while animals at the zoo indulged in fruit ice blocks to cool down from the heat. In northern England, though temperatures reached around 28 degrees, kids were out splashing on the beach. The hot weather is expected to continue till tomorrow, though the Met Office has issued thunderstorm warnings for later tonight in the central and northern areas of the UK. The evening session of the Republican National Convention opened yesterday amid enthusiastic agreement among the party faithful that Donald Trump was uniquely suited to become the 45th President of the United States. Breaking from the common practice in which the nominee waits until the last evening of the convention before making an on-stage appearance, Trump introduced his wife, Melania, and offered a much abbreviated version of his campaign speech. But there was a sense of déjà vu in Melania's speech, which observers said bore similarities with Michelle Obama's speech in 2008. A Trump campaign official, however, said Melania's writers may have accidentally added some borrowed phrases. Take a listen.
From a young age, my parents impressed on me the values that you work hard for what you want in life, that your word is your bond, and you do what you say and keep your promise, that you treat people with respect.
And Barack and I were raised with so many of the same values, like you work hard for what you want in life, that your word is your bond, that you do what you say you're going to do, that you treat people with dignity and respect.
Because we want our children in this nation to know that the only limit to your achievements is the strength of your dreams and your willingness to work for them.
We want our children and all children in this nation to know that the only limit to the height of your achievements is the reach of your dreams and your willingness to work hard for them.
With the Rio Olympics less than 3 weeks away, the International Olympic Committee promised the toughest sanctions available after a report found Moscow had concealed hundreds of positive doping tests in many sports ahead of the Sochi Winter Games in 2014. The IOC did not spell out whether it would heed growing calls for Olympic bans already imposed on Russia's track and field athletes and weightlifters to be extended to all its competitors in Rio. IOC President Thomas Bach said the independent World Anti-Doping Agency investigation had revealed a shocking and unprecedented attack on the integrity of sport and on the Olympic Games. The IOC Executive Board is to hold a telephone conference today to take its first decisions, which may include provisional measures and sanctions with regard to the Rio Olympics. Barcelona's summer soccer camp is heading south this year to Lionel Messi's homeland. Hundreds of children signed up for the chance to get insider tips from one of the world's greatest soccer clubs, Isaac Guerrero, in Buenos Aires. The summer camp is open to boys and girls aged 6 to 17, with children divided into different groups named after legends like Messi and Rakitic. The camp's objective is to teach the next generation of soccer players the technique, tactics and mentality that have kept Barcelona on top. Similar Barcelona-endorsed camps are taking place in the United States and Europe. And finally, moderate conditions continue in most regions for the rest of tonight, with northerly moderate to brisk winds stirring dust in the Badia region. Tomorrow, normal summer conditions prevail in hilly areas, but it remains relatively hot in other parts of the kingdom, with northwesterly moderate to brisk winds. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect high temperatures tomorrow, moderate to brisk winds, and slightly high seas. Here now is a look at temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow. And to close, here's a reminder of the day's top stories. At least 56 civilians are killed in airstrikes on Manbij in northern Syria, as a meeting on Syria convenes in London, with the US Secretary of State and a number of European foreign ministers in attendance. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights urges Turkey to uphold the rule of law as it rounds up thousands involved in a failed coup and voices alarm at the mass suspension of judges and prosecutors. And the French government urges lawmakers to extend emergency rule that gives police greater search and arrest powers after criticism it did not do enough to prevent the Nice truck attack. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the news. I'm Alia Tuqan. Thank you for joining us and have a good night.